Welcome to Happy Homes and Gardens. I'm your host. My name is Daphne Royse. I am a real estate broker, architecture, and interior designer. Olga Trusova is a tech executive turned design and management consultant and formal design thinking instructor at Stanford University. Olga is also author of Calm Living, a book that offers practical and easy to follow strategy for cultivating a calm environment, both at home and at work. Let's welcome Olga and listen to her valuable insights. Hello, Olga.
Hi, Daphne. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to chat with you about my book.
Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, I'll be happy to. My background is a little bit unusual in terms of kind of a blend of design and technology. I am a former tech executive. I served several years at AAA as Vice President of Innovation, working on projects from self-driving cars to wildfire mitigation. I studied business design and technology at Stanford University. Hence, my background is blended. And I have a bachelor's in computer science. So I went the traditional technology route, and then I started to learn more and more about innovation and design. So during COVID, while I was serving as a tech executive and while being a mom to a young daughter, COVID-19 hit all of us, and we were all working from home. So during that time, I also wrote a book called Calm Living, specifically focusing on how we can create an environment at home where we could be our best selves, to our partners and to our families, and be, our ambitious selves working for the different organizations we are serving. And it's very much rooted in design strategy and innovation work that I have done in the past. A little bit of a fun tidbit as well. I'm originally from Ukraine. So I came to the US, to the Bay Area 25 years ago, and I loved it. I fell in love with California, with its culture of innovation and design, and I stayed here. And this is my first home now, and I'm very excited to continue to live here in San Francisco Bay Area.
Calm Living was born during the pandemic. What inspired you to write this book?
During the pandemic, I was applying sort of the same innovation principles I used in my work. And we can talk a little bit about that, about design thinking, this methodology that I introduced in the book as well, and what I used with different organizations I've consulted for or I worked for before. I've applied the same principles to my life. So at that time, I think a lot of you have experienced tremendous amount of stress because our work has shifted to be, from home completely for about 3 years. And our spaces often were not equipped to serve us in the same space with our families, our pets, right? Our kids and or roommates or could be vice versa, very isolating. It created very isolating experiences for people if they lived alone. So I saw an interesting challenge and an interesting opportunity for us to really think about our environment. So my personal life kind of inspired me because I was living a very stressful sort of existence with a very young child at the time, my mother, our whole family, our pets, and being a vice president, the youngest vice president at AAA at the time, working on very high stakes projects. So what I have done is I've actually taken the opportunity to go to Maui, Hawaii, and to work from home there for 6 months. So I thought to myself, how can I reimagine and redesign my experience? And over there, I had a lot of inspiration in terms of how we can create a more calm yet productive environment. So that's what inspired me. My former professor at Stanford University, also a book author, wrote a book called The Achievement Habit. And when I was chatting with him at that time, he suggested I write a book. and about my experience and how it could potentially help many other tech executives, tech workers, but also anyone, single moms, parents trying to work from home, trying to balance it all. And so that's where the book idea came from. And I was fortunate enough to get an introduction to Chronicle Books. And they're a fabulous publisher here in San Francisco. They do a lot of work with authors in art and design and really fun cookbooks. So I worked with them during COVID to finalize this. And a lot of the sort of background and tools and tips in this book come from my work in creating innovation environments, right? And kind of interesting spaces for different organizations like Nordstrom and Starbucks and AAA, as well as healthcare organizations like Kaiser and Sutter. So you will hear a lot of personal stories. So I started to also interview a lot of people during that time because I could hear a lot of complaining and a lot of stress from my friends, right? In a variety of roles, like I was saying, from single moms to busy executives on a variety of challenges in that time. And we continue to experience that, right? So most of us now went back to the office, but we have some days where we work from home. And the underlying current there was about sustainable ambition and balancing it all. And how can our environments, no matter where, in the office, at home, support this kind of interesting desire that many of us have, right? How can you create an ambitious life, yet a calm life where we can be our best self at home, for our partners, for our families, for our kids, and at work where we can achieve the goals and achieve the career ambitions that we have. Anyway, so that I think theme exists and continues to exist. And I've done other podcasts as well, where I talk about specifically sort of sustainable ambition and how to create space, physical space, but also different rituals and routines you can cultivate to be your best self in all these different areas. But anyway, so the long story short, that's sort of where the idea for the book came from, right? Being a tech executive, a busy mom, working from home during COVID. And I think a lot of the lessons here in this book are really valuable for us for, day to day. And we'll talk a little bit more about sort of daily practices and tips, but also bigger shifts that we can do. Like I said, I've interviewed a lot of people, close to 100 people during that process of writing the book, as well as, looking back at all the different materials and teaching that I have done at Stanford University, as well as the business school and at the design school, and my own experience of, like I said, creating different environments in different corporate settings. But the different, themes that came up from my interviews, I outline in the book, and I tell different stories of various people and how they've approached this big challenge of stress and chaos and so on with balancing work and life, and what solutions from big to small they've created. As an example, when I was in Maui in Hawaii, I've reached out to a former classmate of mine who at that time decided to completely change her life, right? This is an example of a big transformation. Her husband was a venture capitalist here in Silicon Valley. She was a busy executive at Google, and they had a young daughter. They decided to move to Maui permanently. They bought a plot of land and they've built their dream home. And you can I'm sure you have many examples and stories of how you engage with your clients, and their home is a representation of who they are, of their dreams, of their goals, right? How they want to be. So they decided to transform their life completely. COVID prompted them to do that. I think I shared this with you before. Her husband continues to work as a venture capitalist remotely, and he flies here. And my friend commuted for 2 years until they established their new life every 2 weeks. Back and forth to the Bay Area and back. So it took them a while to transition and create their dream life and their dream home, where they have a beautiful pool and they can see the Milky Way at night, right? So that's an example, I outline of something that people, just decide that they want a big change in their life, and how they approach that. They finally pick up and leave, right? It took them 2 years, couple of years to establish. And then they give small examples of small rituals, right? You can invest in a set of candles, for example, and light them every Friday night as a reminder that you're going to mark the beginning of a digital detox. So for 24 hours after the work week on Friday night until Saturday night, you're going to completely unplug. So you can invest in a very small item that you can place somewhere in your home as a visual reminder of what you need to be doing, of a new routine in your house that you will be doing every week. So that's an example of a very small yet very meaningful, impactful way to calm your senses, to de-stress, to decompress and unplug. So anyway, that gives you a sense of the different kinds of transformations I also saw that people were doing. So hopefully that is really useful and will be impactful for others as well.
And how did you get involved with the design?
That's a great question. As I mentioned, I am a techie. So I studied computer science for undergrad, and then I went to work on for various startups and tech companies. At that time, and after that, I joined a research lab at Stanford University, where I worked. It was called the Knowledge Media Lab, where I was doing research and development. And I worked there for about 5 years, and I've discovered this place called the Stanford D School. It's the Hasso-Plattner Institute of Design. It was maybe the second year since inception. One of the founders of the D School was David Kelly, who was the CEO and founder of IDEO. It's a global design firm, very famous design firm. They've designed the original Apple mouse, for example. So many of you already know about them, just even through that. Anyway, I didn't know anything about design thinking, D School. So I started to sort of attend some of their events. And my boss at the time suggested that I can go into graduate school. It was the right age for me. And I think I was really curious and really interested in just learning more. And I wanted to also learn more about business and entrepreneurship. So Stanford was the perfect place to do that. So I decided to study sort of for a hybrid degree called Learning, Design, and Technology, where I could bring computer science, pair it with learning sciences, psychology, and design. So that's how I sort of, I got into design. I became very curious, very interested about design thinking, which is not exactly, designing physical products. It's more about the process for innovation, right? Process for creating new product ideas, new services, or business ideas. And I can talk a little bit, about that as well. But anyway, that's how I got into design, right? And my background in computer science served me really well because I was able to deeply understand how certain products work, right? So certain technology products work and build them. And then, pairing it with my new understanding of UI, user experience, user interactions, human-computer interactions. So that's sort of how I went into design. I got my master's there, and then I studied business. I continued on, and I studied business at the business school at Stanford. So that's, that sort of became my foundation and platform for becoming a tech executive after that.
Since you do so much design, what is important to have a calm environment at work and at home?
Funny that you asked. I think a lot of people don't know that our environment is now a part of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So most of you probably have heard of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where some are, first we need to meet our core needs, such as food, shelter, safety, and then we progress to other things like companionship, spiritual awakening, education, our purpose, right? So, so these are our needs as human beings to fulfill ourselves. So later on, environment or space has been added as one of the core needs that we all have. And, you can even kind of test your own experience. You go into multiple spaces probably throughout the day, different homes, different office spaces, you get coffee, and you can check with yourself, how does this space and different environment make you feel? And you probably feel very different when you step into one room, another room, an office space, right? Of course, people make a huge difference in your interactions, but also the space itself, the objects that are surrounding you, and the colors, and because everything around us has been designed, every single object and every single thing, by someone. And that design, I think, has a huge impact on how we feel.
We at work, the office is always the messiest place at home. What would you recommend people do about office space?
I'll tell you, I think for a lot of listeners, they'll probably are wondering about the quick fixes, right? And the tips and tricks. And unfortunately, I have to tell them that a lot of things are highly individual and very personal. What you might like and find pleasurable, I may not. So the premise of design thinking, this methodology, innovative methodology that was taught to me when I was at the Stanford D School, is called design thinking, which, the first step of design thinking is empathy. First, you need to understand the person you're designing for, what their challenges are, what their likes, dislikes, how they want to feel, what is the core problem that they have. Maybe someone's issue in their office is clutter, right? And it really brings them down. When they look around, they cannot focus because there's so many things. Someone else's issue with the office could be it's a very small space, right? And maybe they share it with someone else, so they really feel claustrophobic. So the first step in design thinking is empathy and truly understanding what is the core problem that we're trying to design our new solution for. Then we move on to defining this problem and prototyping, or creating multiple possible solutions, not only one, but several solutions that we can try in a short period of time to understand what really resonates with you, right? And once we land on that solution, then we implement that. And that's what I outline in my book as well. Here it is. So you need to start with really doing an energy assessment in your space. So I recommend taking, if you have Post-it notes, the stickies, colorful stickies, one would be green in color, the other would be pink or red in color. So green would be energy giving. What about your office is energy giving? Literally walk around your space, have that green, different green stickies. You can then put them on pieces of furniture or a certain space or a wall or your computer or whatever, and just note what gives you energy specifically in your space, and what on the red sticky you would write what drains you. So maybe there is a favorite chair that you gravitate toward, or maybe you don't use the desk and the chair and you tend to sit on the sofa all the time. So that's something to note about yourself, right? Because you're not using things that were intentionally designed for work, but you're actually using something else because it gives you energy. You don't know why you do it, but you gravitate toward that. Same thing with energy draining. So I would start with, first of all, understanding yourself, how you use your office, and what is the core problem. And just spend an hour walking around and doing that. Hopefully that'll give you some interesting revelations. Like I was saying, it could be clutter. It could be sharing space with others. It could be you don't have a view. I speak a lot about the importance of panoramic vision. So there's research that came out of Stanford, Dr. Andrew Huberman, about the importance of panoramic vision for our stress levels. And for example, if you walk on the beach and you look at the vastness of the ocean, your eyes stop to focus on any specific object. You have a gaze, right? And you start to look, and you shift your focus completely, and you become more calm, your breath slows down, and it's so important for us. Same thing could happen if you're hiking, for example, in the woods, and you look at greenery, and eventually you just defocus, right? Your vision your eyesight defocuses, and you calm down. So it's so important for us to have a window with a view where we can, of some kind, or artwork that could create a similar effect. So it depends. I think there are many, many things you can do in your office space, but the key is first identify what's lacking, what drains you, and then you can apply some of these research-based tweaks to your space specifically for calm and de-stressing, right? So those are some examples people can do. Again, if they cannot create a window with a view, they can buy a beautiful poster, beautiful, horizontal artwork with some nature and things like that.
Office with view. I have a window. I always want to face in a window. One of these days, I might move my desk just to look out the window.
Or you can, again, you don't have to move your desk, but periodically you can get up and perhaps take a look, right? You don't have to necessarily spend most of your time there, but just as a reminder for yourself to also create these routines throughout the day where you can leverage things like the window with a view, leverage, I talk a little bit about some, different objects, for example, and attaching certain value or meaning to objects. For example, we have we all have sentimental objects, things that are not necessarily maybe prettiest, right? You maybe have inherited something from your grandma and it reminds you, could be, a piece of jewelry, or could be a cup, may not be your taste, but you have an attachment to that object. So they're called attachment objects. So it has a sentimental value. Photographs of our families, right? Some things we've inherited. We didn't choose those, but they remind us of something sentimental. Other attachment objects may be more to our taste. They may not necessarily be aesthetically pleasing to others, but for some reason we gravitate to them, like our favorite mug, right? We could have our favorite mug or a favorite pen. It's not something designed by a famous designer, but we happen to just love that one mug out of 10 that we have. So that is our personal sort of attachment. We just happen to like the object itself. There's something about it. And then there are functional objects, functional attachment objects. And functional, I mean, of course, we have our laptop, so things that perform functions. And I talk about calm objects. What kind of objects can you have in your home that will remind you of calm? So I mentioned candles as an example, as a reminder to start a digital detox at the end of the week. I even have interesting and fun things that you can do that are cheap, easy, and almost everyone has them. You could have a small bowl and put 100 rice grains in that bowl. And when you feel stressed during the day, for example, you're on Zoom, right? And you have a mini break, you can take a break and you can take out the 100 rice grains, count them and put them back in the bowl. Literally, we take a minute, but it's a meditation practice. It'll, focus you on another task and really create a meditation moment in your day. So those objects are functional calming objects. At the D School, we have a gong that will signal a transition. Literally, when there will be a transition in some design activity or we're shifting, there will be an instructor who would, hit the gong and sound the gong, and all the students would hear the gong. I recommend using, a miniature gong in your house. My friend, who's a single mom with 2 boys, has a very chaotic environment at home, and her boys are running around. So she uses that to sort of, when she's done, if they're not responding to her verbal communication, she sounds the mini gong and to sort of calm everyone down, take a pause, reset. So those kinds of objects, right? We talk about big space redesign, but we're also talking about investing in small items, depending on different challenges you might be having in your space, and leveraging those objects to create a more calm environment at home intentionally. And I've used them in different workshops as well. So the rice counting we've used with actually architects. I was invited to do a leadership offsite, annual leadership offsite for the leadership team and different architects at an architecture firm in San Francisco. And that's one of the exercises we started before we began. So we gave everyone rice, bowl of rice, and we had them count different rice grains. And then I did not say why they're doing it. I asked them, and we removed furniture from the room, and we had these esteemed architects do that for about a minute, and then we asked them how they felt afterwards and what we think the meaning of this exercise was. And some of them said, oh, well, we just, it's who was the fastest in counting the rice grains, or who was the most accurate to getting exactly the number. And I said, no, no, no. Did I ever ask you how many rice grains were there? Did I ever time you? No. Did I ever restrict you? If you weren't comfortable in the space, you could have gone outside, right? You could have done many, many things. So it was an exercise in asking yourself, why am I uncomfortable, making myself uncomfortable while working? Why do I stress myself out while working? There are other ways to do that. Anyway, so that was a really interesting exercise we've incorporated. And I think that really helped them before we kicked off, because they're basically doing planning and goal setting for the next year. So that was a really nice moment for them to pause and then continue on with their planning.
So what is the most challenging part of people's working environments and at home?
That's another great question. I would say in my interviews with others, I mean, there are many, but the top two that came up, one is sharing your space with others, and two is transitioning. So lack of intentional transitioning from, working to home life, to engaging with friends, back to work, right? So we don't design for transition oftentimes, and we don't design for sharing or not sharing, or how do we, create boundaries. So I would say those two are very interesting and very important. I even talk about, how can you create a feeling if you're at home or even in an office, being together alone, what I call being together alone. When you are, for example, working from a coffee shop, you have this feeling. So if you bring your laptop and you sit there, right, you are together with many people. You happen to like maybe the noise and the environment, and it almost becomes like a background noise in some cases, but you are alone. You're focused on specific tasks. So that's the kind of feeling that we can also create in our office environment. And you can even note as a designer, you can sit and ask yourself, have you tried working or being in other places, like the library? Have you been to a lot of people love not working, but they love the museum experience, wandering around. They could spend the whole day. That's another experience of being together alone. So what about these experiences, that we can learn from and incorporate into our lives? Because we are often together, but we have to do focused activities. And then transitioning, right? If you come even like rushed, you come home from a stressful day at work, how do you transition to facing your loved ones, and now be in another state of mind, in another environment? So I think those two are very challenging. I don't think we have great solutions for those. And I think, again, I talk a lot about it's not enough to design physical things, physical spaces and physical solutions. You have to attach routines and rituals to those, to activate them, to support us to be our best selves.
What is your philosophy of design overall?
Well, it's not mine. So I learned this at Stanford. I very much embrace design thinking. It's been around for several decades right now, and have really proven to be a great methodology for creating human-centered products and services. So this is, truly, I embrace human-centered design. And what that means is, like I mentioned, is focusing, first of all, on empathizing and understanding the person you are designing for, and what their unique personality is, what their challenges are that they're trying to solve, instead of giving them a toolkit or a toolbox with some theoretical, principles that they can apply. So it truly is really understanding the user or the customer. That's one. And two, in terms of spaces, I talk a little bit about, it's called, I think it's a blend of Japanese and Scandinavian design. So it's a fabulous kind of blend of wabi-sabi, minimalism, and truly making the human at the center of the environment and making all the things in the environment serve me, serve the person, instead of me being the prisoner in the environment, right? And being uncomfortable in the chairs or being, not feeling empowered enough. And oftentimes people feel stuck in their spaces and not feeling supported by their environments, right? They feel like they have to fit into the space, not the other way around, that the space has to fit in with their needs.
So we are both in Silicon Valley. It's such a melting pot. What differences do you see between cultures and their environment?
Oh, that's a great question. I actually touch upon this a little bit. And again, I embrace the philosophy of you need to be the designer of your life and your environment, because we are coming with our unique backgrounds, our unique experiences. Even when we talk about sentimental objects, attachment objects, what you might like, I may not, or someone else may, they are bringing something from their childhood that they're familiar with, etc. So I would say, first of all, you are the designer of your life and of your space. So you have to be empowered. Don't, you can rely on other interior designers and other people's tastes, but truly this book is about empowering everyone to be a designer of their own environment and their own daily routines based on who they are, right? And what they're bringing to the table. I do talk a little bit about borrowing certain rituals and practices from different cultures. For example, I talk a little bit about Palo Santo, which is, this beautiful sticks that you can light, right, to cleanse your space, or incense, right? So we can, again, this is a ritualistic object or functional object you can use to remind yourself maybe this is something you want to do in your space. That's an example of a very cultural experience. Digital detox. I learned about this from Shabbat, for example. So this is from Judaism. This has existed for thousands of years. This practice of not working completely for 24, 25 hours and not, and for us, it means not using technology. So that's a great tool that we can borrow from another culture and incorporate it into our modern life. And now we can even look at, this can carry beyond space, but in general, goal setting. I know Lunar New Year celebration is coming up, right? And so different cultures celebrate the beginning of the new year in different ways. So how can we borrow and learn from this for goal setting? For New Year, right? What can we do? How can we incorporate different elements from your own culture or from others? So I think it's really rich and for opportunities for us to reimagine our own daily routines, our own spaces. So I would say this is a great advantage that we have here, where we can learn from each other and borrow from each other's cultures, for sure.
I learned so much today, Olga, just by talking to you. And will you write a second book? If so, what will you focus on?
I hope so. I haven't planned for it yet, but if I do, I think it would be really interesting to think about AI. Of course, that is top of mind for everyone. Now, how artificial intelligence is going to change our life, both our work lives, our personal lives, transform the way, how technology looks. So I think that's one element that is really important for us. And so I would definitely write about, I would be very curious to even do research and to interview people to understand how, like, what the future would look like for us day to day, for our lives, our daily lives. The second thing I would say, I would be very curious to understand and learn more and try to see how we can create any sort of calm amidst this chaos, is natural disasters. As we know, with wildfires, this is a direct threat to our homes and to how we live and where we live. So I think we will see a lot of change in how people approach where they live, where they work, where they migrate, right? So I think that we will see a lot of change, and you're following trends and trying to predict how it's all going to be. So and that's something I also worked on when I was at AAA. So, my role was in innovation and design thinking, this kind of empathy-driven human-centered innovation. So in addition to tech, like self-driving cars and apps for Gen Zs, we've also worked on wildfire mitigation efforts. We've partnered with some interesting startups in the space, as well as we launched like a global contest soliciting ideas for how we can tackle this very big challenge together. So I think those two would be top of mind for me. I would be very curious and those are big problems and also opportunities for us as human beings. So both the new evolution of AI and the ongoing challenges we have, like we see in Los Angeles right now with wildfires, for example.
Thank you so much, Olga, and I really appreciate all the valuable insights here.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for having me. People can, if anyone is interested in my book, it's called Calm Living by Olga Trusova. It's available on Chronicle Books website and Amazon and other platforms as well. If you would like to get in touch with me, I have my consulting group where we do this kind of innovative management consulting for companies, and then for individuals, I created a lifestyle brand where I specifically, introduce workshops. I do assessments of spaces and things like that on individual basis. So if you'd like to get in touch with me, we can share this information as well. So thank you so much, Daphne. It was a pleasure chatting with you. For corporate engagements, you can go to bluefiglabs.com. So this is my management consulting company, Bluefig, that I've had for over 15 years now with my partners from, ex-IDEO, ex-McKinsey, Stanford folks. So we would love to help leaders reimagine their organizations in this new era with so many new challenging things from hybrid work to AI. And the lifestyle company is called Air is Mayor. AIRISMER.com. And that's where you can also purchase my book, take some online workshops, and engage with me if you'd like to transform your space.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Olga.
Thank you. Thank you, Daphne.